All right, hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of What the Tech is Product Management. And this time we have the pleasure of hosting Pierre Tsai, a colleague of mine at Walmart Connect. You guys know both me and Shruti by now, so we are PMs in our regular day life. But Pierre, over to you. We'd love to know more about your intro, and then we can get going with some of the questions.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's nice to be on. My name is Pierre Tsai. I'm currently product director for display ads in Walmart Connect. I joined in September 2022, and I hired to kind of grow and build the team for ad serving and optimization. This is my sixth firm as a PM. I started back in 2006. Been in the Valley since 2000.
That's great.
Nice. Can you tell us more? Like, I mean, what kind of roles did you have to navigate before ending up at Walmart Connect?
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as a software engineer, and worked for a few years after graduating, and I shifted from software engineering to sort of a professional services role, consulting for a couple of years at a small startup, and really fell into product management, by chance completely, and luck. I don't think I even really knew what product management was, other than my very limited exposure. But the firm I was at was a very small startup, maybe 25 people, and we got acquired by Oracle and in 2006 or so, and I joined on as a product manager. Somehow fell into a principal role, even though I was pretty inexperienced. But as a working at a small startup, when you get acquired by a larger firm, that's a pretty natural progression where they take you on as product management, and you help drive the integration or the sales efforts. That's what I did
Yeah,
for at Oracle. So
nice.
after that, for about 5 years, I got a chance to learn a bunch about product, but it was still fairly early in my career. So I wanted to go back to the startup game. Ended
Was
up
that in ad tech at that point, or was it like a
no,
new
it's
industry?
marketing technology. It was a
Okay,
predictive analytics company for enterprise software, and so mostly selling to sort of Fortune 500 e-commerce, financial services, some others. And but really, a lot of it was kind of doing the same things that I do now in ad tech, but for marketing use cases.
got it.
In 2012 or so, I kind of got the itch to go back to the startup world, and left Oracle and joined Splunk, which is a small sort of analytics company, but sort of for log management and IT use cases. I still ended up kind of gravitating towards marketing use cases then, because that's what I was fascinated by, and but that was a great experience, and working sort of in a more technology focused role, with
You
very
were at
different sort
Splunk,
of.
right, Shruti, at
Yes,
one
yes,
point?
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome!
why I was smiling. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was at Splunk. I think I joined in 2018 and left in 2022. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Have you
I
heard
joined
of
Splunk.
Pierre? Like, did they have Wall of Fame, Pierre on the
No,
wall?
okay.
Yeah, no, but I can associate. I think Splunk was one fun company to work for.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It was an incredible experience. I joined the year before that went IPO, and I stayed after the IPO. So it was a rocket ship at the time,
Yeah.
and
Mm,
learned a lot. But that was a very different role than the previous one, different role than I do at work now. But um, from Splunk, I then spent a short period at another company, a Splunk competitor called AppDynamics,
Yeah.
which was also sort of a darling in the space, and again, kind of like in a very different role, growth focused and customer acquisition focused, because they were again growing sort of pre IPO. And then I joined my first ad tech company in 2014, 2015, Chartboost, which is a mobile app ad network, and started working sort of in data first, and then ad relevance, and sort of preliminary before my rest of my ad tech career. 2017, I joined AdRoll, and started working in real time bidding. And there, I became a people manager for. I spent about 5.5 years there, and 2022 at Walmart. So that's all
Yeah.
six.
awesome, awesome.
That's quite some amazing experience, like enterprise and then ads. Yeah, I feel like you have moved around and gained all the right expertise. Yeah, and that's great to hear.
Oh man, yeah. Looking back at you hope to think of it that way, but often it's just one move at a time, and sometimes it's a lot of luck. I feel like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, through like a lot of people ask me as well, like when do you decide to switch versus when do you decide to stay? I don't know, Nishant, can we start with one of those topics, like because we just went through the work experience, or do you want to cover something else first?
Oh, no, no, go for it. Like we can then move on to a different question.
Yeah, so Pierre, like through your experience, like let's say from PS jumping into product management, like what made you do that? I know you said like it happened by chance, and even as you move from company to company, I think you have quite a few companies who were in hyper growth phase, right? Like App Dynamics, Splunk, and a lot of other. How did you
Yeah.
make that transition happen? Like, what did you think of before joining those companies?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, and I think about this a lot whenever young PMs, want advice or ask about how to get into product management, or people that are outside of product management ask. Like my first entry into product management was like as I mentioned, just by luck and chance. And while that's I definitely feel fortunate of that. There is a sort of affinity that if you're working in a professional services role, consultative role at a small firm, you're like right, right, really close to the problem, right? You're close to
Yes.
the sales cycle,
Mm,
you're close
Yes.
to how execution and implementations go, and also customer support. So all
Yeah.
the key things in the value chain that I think are key to then building a product around it when you get acquired. But that first transition, I would say I don't get much credit for that move, especially joining a firm like Oracle, which has such a established sort of business that to learn from. And really, was really fortunate to kind of join at that time, and then take some time to kind of treat it as an education, for myself, learning about product management and learning about the space that was already really well established in enterprise software. But then, moving from Oracle to Splunk was a pretty different move. It was still enterprise software, but the distribution strategy was so different. SaaS was really becoming the dominant approach at the time, and also Splunk and AppDynamics had this sort of small land and expand type strategy to where customers would download and use and adopt and evangelize before they were paying, and that was very
mm,
novel back in 2012. And again, it was a lot of luck. I think I got to I applied cold and found a sort of a hiring manager who was willing to take a risk. And I think the enterprise background helped in Splunk. And after joining there, then AppDynamics sort of was a natural follow on because those two were competitors or peers that sort of had a lot of awareness of each other in the market. But you fake it till you make it. Sometimes when you join these firms and you have to make up for skills.
Yeah.
Moving to ad tech was much more deliberate, I would say. I'd always been aware of ad tech, working in marketing technology. Often, the firms we worked with were dealing with challenges with managing ad tech, platforms and partners, and the
I see.
same set of decisions that they might make for marketing, they had to make for advertising. And it was always a curiosity of mine whether I could translate the skills I'd learned and the technologies that I'd learned in marketing technology and apply them in ad tech. So Tarpus was a they happened to be at the time I think it's 45 people, but they were growing as well. And I happened to had worked with the CPO at the time back to my first company as a software engineer. So it was, again, a lot of chance. But once I sort of got the confidence at the Tarpus that I could actually apply some of those skills and succeed, then it was just a matter of figuring out, okay, well, at scale, if the Sharpie at that time was maybe let's say $200 million company, the next company I wanted to look for was going to be bigger than that, just to have more reach and more scale and more learning, and Walmart Connect was so on bigger than the last one. So I really looked to find companies that were hopefully growing and also where I could learn something new or apply my existing skills and learn something new as well.
No, all of that is great. Just one last question on this topic, at least from my end, Pierre. You moved around like in like some small companies as well, right? And a lot
Yeah,
of people who graduate from college, like, and I have done the same. Like, I've joined at like growth, hyper growth, and like Series B growth, like just IPO'd kind of companies as well. And a lot of people tend to work at the fangs of the world. Like, what made you deliberately choose these? Like Splunk, I think at that point was very early on, right? Like it
yeah, yeah.
probably would have just IPO'd or would have been pre-IPO, as you said, right?
Pre-IPO, yeah.
What made you take that bet?
For me, I was always drawn to the startup environment, and so I think a lot of people might go and spend a lot of their career and have very successful careers, and never necessarily going to that really small startup mentality. But it's extremely rewarding and exciting. I think it still is. I think it has that mystique. But working at a startup, you learn and have to apply a totally different set of skills in a much more resource constrained environment. And you tend to work a lot harder too, especially your first time around. And then when you go to sort of a large firm, taking those skills, you find you I think for the same amount of time are you've outcompeted other people in some ways, and other ways you have lots to learn because in enterprise there's also different kinds of resources and skills. So I read once later in my career that there's a particular trend of zigzagging between small firms and large firms as being like a lucrative way to kind of grow your value.
Yeah.
It sounded very true to me, at least from my own experience, and I can see why it's what's compelling. I don't know how easy it is to apply in practice, but I think if you luck out into it and you're able to do that, I think it tends to give you opportunities to level up
Yeah.
at each move and then apply new skills at each move.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Nishant, off to you.
That's a great segue actually, because it helps to zoom out here to understand how did you intentionally move between these career decision. But if you were to go back and piggyback on the topic of up leveling, so what kind of skill sets did you have to garner as you were transitioning from a smaller company to Oracle maybe, or like software to product, and then maybe a product and a big company to a small company, and now at Walmart, right? And from regular product management to people management, right? So if you
Yeah,
can just give us like a high level summary of the different skills that you had to pick up along the way, that'll be really helpful.
yeah. I mean, I think my first move into product management was pretty dramatic, just because I was so early in my career and I had never been exposed to. I'd worked at IBM when I was before I graduating, but it was really kind of in a limited capacity because I didn't have a degree yet. But so I would say Oracle's was the first firm after graduating that was really enterprise and ultra profitable, long legacy of success, and like deeply rooted. Like, I mean, they're entrenched in their success, and they're still doing fantastic, right, profitability
Yeah,
wise. But going in there, I was not prepared at all for that, the cultural change, and also just the scale and the resources they had. I was much, I went from a 25-person firm that was barely making our payrolls because we were getting short on funding, to this, suddenly this enterprise role with a massive reach. It probably took about a year and a half or so before really realizing, oh, here's what we have to do as a small, 5-person team to kind of take advantage of what's happened, which is, Oracle acquiring us and then applying us throughout their portfolio. But I would say, learning how to scale yourself, operate as a product manager in that large of an org is much less about individual accounts and maybe specific wins or with sales, but much more about developing the product and marketing sort of materials, supporting all the distribution and the resellers, the partners, and the support staff and sales staff that are going to go global and take your product
right.
to another level.
Yeah.
Um, you
Almost
know,
like come up with like some sort of a playbook versus
yes,
thinking in terms of one account at a time. Makes
yes,
Yeah.
sense.
exactly. And really macro decisions, things little things as like compensation or bonusing structure for sales in enterprise space is so important. You could do everything else in the world right and get your compensation
I
package
know what
wrong.
you
It's
mean. Yeah,
not going to sell anything.
Yeah, it's I feel like, even early in my career, like we were all focused on building the product, and then like, okay, sales would somehow figure it out. And now as you grow up, it's more about how do you scale the product? How do you make sure sales actually goes and pitches your product?
Yeah.
And how are you able to scale the GTM becomes a huge part of the product management life. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's like a realization you don't get until you've done it and realize it, and then afterwards, and as an example of something that you can then bring with you to a smaller firm or larger firm, it just clicks, right, and it changes. I think how you spend your time and who you spend your time with when you go to a
Yes.
new firm and ramp up. Um, and other examples of that, there's the on the GTM side, there's also technology pieces, like depending on the
yeah,
type of firm it is, or the way that it adds value. I think you have to kind of the different PM roles have to kind of do a different set of things. Like at Splunk, joining at the time, I was in their applications team, so they were taking their core platform and really trying to apply to lots of different use cases in different sort of areas of technology. And so and it was already clear that the company was in hyperscale mode. The IPO was already lined up, and it was a matter now of just raising awareness and doing the product marketing, and broadening sort of its reach to as many different use cases as possible. That was the sort of bottom line. Creating, evangelizing, creating awareness, driving users and installs. But it wasn't about revenue at the time. At least for the applications teams, much more about reach.
Yes.
So that was a fascinating difference, right? It wasn't about licensing revenue, and that all came as like a secondary effect.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so that
Okay.
made that role interesting, but also had to require us to learn a bunch of different skills. Like before that, I'd never thought about meetups or
Hmm.
social media, using social media as a part of my toolkit. And it was a lot pretty new at the time too. But for me, like going to conferences, keeping lists of sort of signups and for meetups and so on, it was just a different set of activities that I have to go with. So you have to do that as well as look at the technology strategy. But for the most part, I think that was what was new about Splunk, and App Dynamics was something similar, but they were much more growth focused. So at the time, it was about the new skill there that was really I think formative for me was working with digital marketers within the firm and having that be a part of the dotted line effect of trying to combine and balance digital marketing and other sort of customer acquisition tactics to figure out how to make the funnel as efficient and effective as possible. So that was, I think, probably a great role to as a pre-step to going into ad tech, because it was gave me my first taste of managing sort of a work group that also involved operations and IT and marketing, in addition to product engineering.
That's awesome. It sounds like, okay, initially you had to figure out how to, I mean, the common theme I see is like XFN partnerships versus having to do it all by yourself because you now have a bit larger team. But at the same time, adopting the sales tactics across these different firms, right? Sometimes it's product led, sometimes it's sales led, sometimes it's marketing led.
Yeah,
So accordingly, partnering with the different folks is something that you had to pick along the way. That's interesting. And also,
yeah,
like, if you were to think in terms of a little bit of how did you get into that people management role and what was the world like as you transition? That will be really helpful. Like, how do you, yeah, figure out managing all these
yeah,
alphas, product managers who are all like ambitious?
yeah. I definitely have a point of view in this. I feel like in my career, I had opportunities to at many PM's careers, they have a point in their career where they kind of decide between a people management route versus sort of a domain or technology expertise, maybe a principal role. And
Hmm.
the first time I think that came about for me, I was probably Oracle at the time, and I remember definitely making a decision. Oh, I think I'd rather prefer the principal route, and I made that decision, and later, sort of when the second time around, had a chance to sort of change my mind, and that was until Admiral, which is 2017 or so. But I definitely, when I tell the story to PMs or to colleagues, and I usually tell it in a way where I say, uh, you know, I waited, and actually, it led to a different set of options for me. But I encourage, anybody who's sort of interested in going to, if they have an inkling towards people management, you should definitely try it, because
Hmm.
the way that it can amplify sort of your career and help you scale yourself is unmatched in terms of, as a product management role. Is There's nothing quite like it, in terms of how effective it can be, and also how different the set of skills you have to learn are, and the exposure it gives you. So I say that to encourage folks to give it a try, and if you even have a thought that you might want to do it, or have a capacity to pursue that, because it's a sort of a bigger opportunity cost to sort of pass up than I think you might think. But
Hmm.
it's difficult as a product manager, taking on sort of direct reports. It always requires sort of two things. There
Actually,
has to be
one quick question over here, Pierre. So,
yeah.
can you tell us more about like what was that made you give up that opportunity to go after the people management or when you were young? Because
Yeah.
I rarely meet such people where they say, okay, I want to be an IC. And I know there are a lot of them out there, but
Yeah.
I also want to understand the psyche of like what made you believe that and then what changed over the course.
Yeah, I think because I was a software engineer as I started my career, and sort of had that as a advantage, so to speak, to as far as how I'd focus my product management careers. I always had that as a crutch to lean on, that where I could go and had a facility to go to another technical depth. And because I was sort of a platform product manager in those
Mm,
years, it was a natural sort of a way I could go deeper and add value, and it seemed to be rewarding for me at the time.
I
And
see.
although I had been some exposure to working, as a people leader, it wasn't during direct, sort of direct reports. It was as a consultant. You have a team, and you might, for a long period of time, have a project with different stakeholders, and you have to kind of hire them, so to speak. You have to qualify them and decide who's on the
Mm,
bench and whatnot. But it's not the same, and I think my experience there influenced sort of my choices as far as how I wanted to develop my career, and I chose with. I think I was part of it was maybe not knowing what to do and how to go about it, and also then thinking that I could actually go as far, acting as a principal role. So
I see.
I really don't think it's not a choice I'd recommend. I think ultimately, if you have a chance to work directly with others, even if it's just one person you're mentoring or helping grow, I think it starts to develop a different set of skills that I think is super valuable. Um,
I had one question there, Pierre, and like went through some similar motions as I'm thinking about the next phase of my career too. Don't you think, like, when we are doing product management, there's a lot of people energy you're already managing on thin lines, right? And now you have to manage a whole set of team as well. um, was there ever a fear that, like, amongst all this, probably I'll become, like, to your point, you were software engineer, your ability was to go into depth, would start to lose some of its polish, as I do all of this other thing,
Yeah.
because I only have limited time to do everything, right? So what
yes,
was your take on that? How
I
did you
definitely
get
was.
over that feeling?
I definitely had that feeling, and I think that maybe early on I was probably even self deluded to think that, oh no, I could be different. I could remain sort of relevant and do the things I do now, plus also do those other things. But
Mm,
I think that's something every manager in our industry has to go through, and it's it's stressful, right? Because you don't, are you losing? You also, if you've been around long enough, you see when companies sort of restructure. Sometimes those caught in middle management can sometimes, if they lose influence, are sort of caught in between, the important work the ICs are doing and versus leadership. So those are all fears, you have to deal with, and they're real.
Yeah.
But I think what part gets, you may not see when you're first time you're going through it, or before you go through the transition, is the the world that opens up that requires a different set of time and skills that you have to engage in, and then also your ability to influence the IC work is still there. It's just that it's much more measured.
Yeah.
I think they have read that the period when managers can influence the direction most is at the beginning. Sort of when things start, and I think that's when you have to be more mindful about sort of the setting up expectations and the right KPIs or whatever the case may be. But once you become a manager and as you grow in your career, there's managing up, managing out, setting and defining strategy,
Yeah.
growing and mentoring your team. Those are all such important things that are skills that replace those things that you were doing before. So I think it's a different mindset and a different set of values you have to kind of nurture, but it's super rewarding.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
and when you were making that people management transition, like, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because, like, what is it like to manage PMs with all these high aspirations, and how do you go about it?
Yeah, I started, somewhat late in my career, but at AdRolls when I first really started taking on direct reports, more than just a sort of a dotted line influence, but where you're responsible for their careers, and then continue that on at Walmart, where I had a chance to sort of hire the team out and start from zero and growing to where it is today. Um, but I think the challenges are, especially in a situation where you're working as an IC and then expanding, or have to grow a team before you can actually stop working as an IC. In both those cases, you have to continue to operate and execute in a certain way to make sure that the work is getting done, or that you're able to set the team in the right direction, while also staffing up and involving the team, and filling in and letting go as you go. So um, I think especially from my experience as a manager developing throughout this time, I think some things that have to make your way through is like figuring out when how much you have to sort of micromanage or be directly involved as the team is ramping up, and
Mm-hmm.
then traversing that period where you start letting go and start delegating much more. And it's very much like a, a trust, and then also a letting go piece. I feel like that's a really key part is knowing when it's okay to just not be on top of it, and trusting in your directs and your XFN teams so that they're going to figure out how to get most of it right, and making sure that you just have touch points where you can follow along. um, and knowing when to course correct too. So when you have been sort of maybe not directly in the weeds, but then periodically you find that things aren't what you expect. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it'll still develop out. Sometimes it might not even be perfect, but it's not worth going and correcting. And other times it
Mm-hmm.
is worth taking time and making course correction. Um,
And that's such a
that's all
fine
judgment.
muscle, right? In the sense
What's that?
that that's such a fine muscle to build. In the sense like, okay, your team is going to learn only when they fall, but you don't want them to break their leg. But at the same time, like it's like they're like there's a cost to people learning, or like
Yeah.
if you just let them operate in their sweet spot, then they're never growing, right? So do you have like any mental models for like thinking about like intentionally breaking people's comfort zones? How do you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I can't imagine it ever just being in a place where I feel like I'm done learning on this, because this is something pretty dynamic. But to me, you know, approaching it with in a coaching mindset rather than sort of um, figuring out how to just come in and try to tell people how to do something different. It's a lot easier once the teams are running on their own and they've established some values and systems of thinking themselves. Then when you go about challenging them or trying to course correct, it's not so personal. It's already established. You're really really engaging with a larger group of people and thinking about how you might adjust or how you might propose alternative ideas. But uh, it's definitely something that I think depends a lot on the relationship you build with the individual ICs, so that you can do it from a place of sort of trust and partnership rather than coming in and making turning up what they've done, or maybe being a direct challenge or tearing down. But yeah, I think it varies from case to case, but hopefully you don't have to do it all too often, and you're doing it from a place of sort of wanting to build or add on to, and from a place of asking questions and trying to lead with coaching rather than just sort of telling people what to do.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
never works.
having firsthand experienced how you deal with problems, I echo your leadership principles. Like it never feels like you're telling people how to do their job. It's almost like, okay, like here's an alternative perspective. Have you thought about this? If you did, what are your thoughts about it? And then like it's a dialogue, and as part of it, whether or not I end up picking up your idea, I still learn a lot by just going through that exercise, and it always feels like it's coming handy when I'm making other decisions in the future. So I really appreciate that open dialogue that you create, where it doesn't feel like there's a right answer per se, but there's a right way of dissecting the problem, right? So yeah, I love
Yeah,
that leadership style.
and it's very selfish too. It's if I knew what to do and I was certain of it, and it might even be the easier route. But I often don't know. I mean, often let's and I'm talking to somebody, and I hear something where maybe it's worth discussing. I'm trying to also find out what the right thing to do is, and I know that the team has enough you know sort of experience and you know prior sort of work that you all have thought about it. The team actually knows the answer, and I don't. So all I can do is just try to inject some line of thinking that then helps people question those things and maybe come to that answer themselves.
No, I
Mm.
mean, like, I cannot tell you enough how much that matters, right? Like, whatever level you are, like, if you're working with someone who is just there to, like, make you feel that you need to work in a way where they are thinking something, it becomes difficult for that IC as well, because they don't know where the other person is coming from, rather than giving a perspective that, okay, this is what I thought, you should think about, or you can think about. But again, then there is a line that I will let you pick up. your choices based on what I have, what the feedback I'm trying to give you, right? I feel there are only few leaders who are able to navigate that in a way where they are able to help in the right way possible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had bad experiences in that regard too in my career. I mean, to me, that's like a red flag. When you work with a leader and you suddenly that sort of their direction is supposed to mean suddenly much more than you might think in terms of what
Yeah,
your own scope is. So
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think again, just to close that out, earlier comment, I think one of the things that really comes through here is your curiosity. So it's almost like you're curious about the problem, you're curious about what is the end I see thinking about the problem. And as a result of it, it feels like I'm explaining things to you, and then we are coming to equal level of understanding and then debating about it versus almost like feeling making the person feel like, oh, I have done this before, this is how it needs to be solved. Then it takes away the fun for the person. Like you might be right, but at the end of the day, the product leader also wants to feel like he's able to make the right calls, right? So yeah, I really appreciate that empathy when you're driving conversations, XFN or with your team in general. Anyway, like
yeah.
as you
Thanks.
can tell, I really like working with Pierre.
Yeah,
He's awesome. He's actually hiring for a staff PM at the moment. So any chance that you can crack into it, take it. I would think it'll be one of your best opportunities to grow as a product leader.
awesome.
thanks, Nishanth. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think that's actually a good segue to the next topic. How do you build teams? So, what are you thinking about when you're hiring folks? And I want to take that lens of, I think you had like the luxury of starting a team from scratch, but also having to pick a team that already exists and then like you're adding people around it. So, how did you go about building a team in this scenario?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it matters so much the the charter and the need and the current state of the business. I'll just give you some examples. Like uh, early on, at AdRoll, for example, as my team grew and I got sort of additional scope, often the PMs were already established in the firm and working in maybe in a different team, and it was more about like reaggregating and sort of moving folks around. So at that point, you're growing a team, and you're largely kind of figuring out how to compose or take existing talent and make it work as a team structure, and so on. And you might add roles independently. With that, you're much more trying to fill out sort of the space of your team and trying to figure out what gaps are, or to kind of, depending on what the role is, growing that way. At Walmart Connect, it was very different, right? The charter of the team was being established. So but there was nobody to know in the team yet. So you have to suddenly go from zero to hire out 4 or 5 people in a very short amount of time. While also the charter of the team was large, right? Large and growing. And it's really at a time when I joined Walmart, we were a lot of it was going to depend upon the work of this team, and so it was important for us to hire quickly with a high velocity, high functioning, sort of folks who are then interested in building that 0 to 1, and we were going to do it in a sort of a pretty intense time frame. So you have to balance between finding people who have lots of relevant experience and who could maybe be people who've done this before, with finding people quickly also that were competent and had the aptitude that could grow into that role. And I
Hmm.
find, that I definitely was biased towards the latter. It's much more compelling for me to find folks who have aptitude, who have maybe a passionate sort of a desire to kind of work in that capacity, versus hiring people that are maybe done it before at large firms. I think that's a different kind of role player that might be suitable to kind of manage it once it's established, but different set of, maybe a different set of entrepreneurial skills than to kind of
Hmm.
come into it from a 0 to 1 place. Um, I've found that hiring is it depends on like the situation, like the current environment is pretty different than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. But when you're trying to grow quickly and it's was a rocket ship like it was for Walmart Connect, where retail media was quite the buzz, there was lots of sort of talent that was, I think, available to us. And uh, I think as you balance the sort of the urgency of filling the role versus the pipeline that you're coming in, I think it comes down to really taking some bets on people that you feel like are coachable and have the aptitude, um, and that you can work well with in that environment. As the team sort of filled out and and certain roles get established, then I think you have a little bit more room to seek out different kind of skill set and profiles that you think will help again fill out the team and maybe work well with what you've got. But generally, I think always I'm looking for the same kinds of things. Um, uh, and again, it depends on sort of the timing and urgency and how fast you have to fill the role.
I see. I see. I have a couple of questions, but Shruti, anything that you want to add on or like any?
No, I think this was all great conversation.
Awesome, awesome. So like Pierre, like one of the questions I have is like, as you build a team, at what point are you thinking? I mean, there's like different levers, right? One is like, okay, the right fit for that specific problem that you have in mind for the next, let's say, a couple of years. And then there's also the inter-team dynamics that you have to account for, like depending on what you have at hand. When you're starting from zero, it's a different kind of a problem. But as you are figuring out the end person on the team, how do you think about balancing between what is right for the product versus what is right for the team? Or like
Yeah,
are they like interdependent or like how do you think about it?
yeah, great question. So I think uh, when in the situation I was in 3 years ago or so, when you're 0 to 1, you need to build a team quickly. I think there were some really clear, urgent areas of focus that had to be staffed and to be built out, like the data platform, maybe the optimization functions, and this is an ad
Yeah.
tech specific thing. But once you get to, where you have that team established and for a few years and you've got the key roles filled, there's lots of other concerns you have to start thinking about, especially as you scale. And in my team, 5, 6, seventh person, where you have to really have in mind, your existing staff. How are they going to grow in their career? What are their aspirations? And that has to fold into your hires. So you can't keep on adding staff at product managers at the same level and hope and just keep them all at staff PM forever. And they're ultimately going to get bored or have interest in growing themselves. So whether
Mhm.
they want to pursue their careers and take that IC path, maybe moving into principal or becoming people managers, you ultimately need people managers to continue scaling, so that one, for their own development, so they can have that opportunity, and two, so that you don't have to uh, deal with 7 1-on-ones a week or 8 1-on-ones a week. Eventually, that can just wear down also your ability to influence. So on that matter of growing your team and nurturing their own career opportunities, I've been having that conversation more often, in recent years. And I think one thing I often inform and make sure people know, I think it's important for all PMs to know, to grow as a people manager from an IC role is, that's a big step, and that's a great opportunity for any PM. It's also sort of mysterious. It was for me, like exactly how you would go about doing it. Like, how do you get management skills and experience when you haven't done it before, and to go from that to that role where suddenly you do have direct reports? And it's kind of still like a black box, right? I think at some firms, at small companies, because of need itself, the business need, you might just be forced in that role or luck out into that role. And I think that's the greatest opportunity you can get if if you want to become a people manager, because the bar is low at that point when the company's trying to grow and they can't do anything except for scale, and you're given a chance to kind of fake it until you make it. But if it's not that situation, I think it's often pretty hard. Like, how do you make a case for yourself to kind of grow into that role versus somebody who's coming in from the outside who has that experience already? So I think it's a combination of two things that has to happen. One is, you have to you demonstrate some excellence or some aptitude within the firm where you've proven yourself as a PM. And then there has to be that business need that you have to cultivate a case for. And then those two combined, though, in order for you to promote within, you still have to then have the ICs that would then report to this person be, you have to have that person that have been working in a role where they're already mentoring, already sort of providing oversight or leadership or some kind of guidance to you, so that they have all three parts, sort of in place. And that takes some direct, active work. You have to really make an investment towards that. And so I set that expectation with folks who are interested in that, so that they can themselves realize that they have to not just excel and maybe make sure they're hitting all their marks, but also be ready for when there's a business need. You can make the case and
Yeah.
be operating already in that role where you're already building. capabilities. You're already mentoring, folks who are less experienced than you, and working, being seen as a leader in that way. I think that's how you put yourself in a good position to do that. Um, and it's a lot of work, but I think at least there's like a formula. I think that helps people um, set expectations also for how, what would be required in order to make that jump.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, Pierre. I did have a question now as I'm thinking through this, like I can relate to a lot of things that are happening, or has happened in the past. When you make the case of, let's say, hiring someone from outside, right, to lead a team, and the team already exists, how do you make sure that it's a partnership, right? Like the other partner has to make sure that this set of partners which already exists, they both like each other, right? Like they both work along each other. So what are some of the those things that you think about when trying to make a hire for an existing team?
Yeah.
Yes, so if a hire for a people manager with an existing
Yes.
team.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to think if I've had to do that yet. So I have that's something that I'm currently engaged in, but it's not something I have years of experience with. But I can tell you that um, people who are like people who've been done people management, especially in product before, they have that sort of direct experience already, where maybe they might be responsible for a particular domain or a particular business area, and once you've operated in a way, maybe as a group PM or something,
Yeah.
it's I think it's a pretty clear. It's pretty clear understanding what that next role may be like as you talk to a hiring manager and ask about sort of what the existing team size is and what those people are like. And if you go in as a group manager or people manager, you sort of have those expectations set, right? Often the group PM is able to sort of do the IC role or has done it before and has that people management skill. I think it's for the right team members, and if there's a clear need for direct management, I think as long as uh, it's somebody that have shares your values and is going to operate with the same kind of high level principles, it's generally okay. I think it's sometimes one point of decision is about whether or not you involve your team in that selection process.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you all feel about it, but if, and what your experience is, but I found that I generally don't involve the ICs in that decision making process. Either because it's impractical, because there might be too many, or because ultimately you don't want to kind of complicate you might be existing feelings about who wants to sort of move into leadership versus
Yeah.
with their qualification process itself.
Yep.
What's been your experience with that? Have you found that to be better or?
I mean, like, I know that one of the ways, at least one of my leaders approached it, which I found very beautiful in a way as well, was he would hire someone who has had people management experience and let them execute for 6 months in an IC role. With like the guarantee that if you're able to execute and you're able to collaborate and understand the value system of the company as well as the local team that you're operating in, you get like direct reporting. So that way, like it panned out really well, because a lot of times I felt that when you make external hires, they have had the experience. It also is the value system that that company has and the ecosystem has built, the way they need to operate, like that somehow ends up differing a lot of times when people get hired from external. But it's like you also need to make sure that you're hiring people externally, because then they're bringing something new to the table, right? Like you're
Yeah,
not just like tunnel vision. So I
Yeah.
found that very fascinating when my leader approached it that way, right? Like and it actually helped, because it gave me or someone on the team 6 months to build that relationship, and then the other person also to observe and execute at the same time, show their value as a PM to the
yeah.
company too.
I'm
Yeah.
curious. Did the hiring manager bring on the person and set that expectation with everyone that that's what was the contract?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
interesting.
interesting.
I had the other way around, where like it was still like a land and expand, not personally, but when I was in the offsite team peer, like I think we had James, but then he had a lot of experience. We were curious like what was going on, and he did fantastic over a period of time. And then it eventually started seeming like a couple of us were like gradually rolling into him, and it felt natural though, because he has had the time to prove himself, and we did not feel like, oh, here is another person exactly the same level, trying to lead us, right? So there was that time. It's almost like the same approach that probably App Dynamics or Splunk was doing, land and expand, right? So get them
Yeah.
in, get everyone comfortable, and then do it. But there, I've
Ex-
also been part of situations where they're like, "Okay, here it is. There's a new person, deal with it." And I'm like, "Okay." I mean, like it's a part
that
of
that
the org
yeah.
culture. End of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might give that a try. I think I mean I've experienced a little bit of both too, but yeah, I think I can totally appreciate the value of having that person sort of establish themselves and prove themselves. But having set the contract up front, then they can already start suggesting or influencing the way that the team might operate in the future. So ideally, any time you get a new leader, the hope is that you're excited about it, or that you have some confidence that it's going to make things better.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And how do you think about like, I mean, graduating someone into a leadership role within the team versus like hiring someone from external, right? Especially in the context of, okay, in some cases you might luck out by saying that, okay, there's just one person who's truly deserving of it within your team. Or in other cases, there could be a couple of people who are equally good at it. And then it comes down to the hard choices, right? Do I give them or do I bring a new one and be equally unfair to both of them, right? So how do
Yeah.
you go about that, those decisions?
So I've never, to be honest, like some of I've I think often bringing in somebody from external is very appealing and very attractive, and I think it's important to understand some of the just the surface level dynamics. Right, if you bring in somebody externally, you're making a case for a role on the team that you need a senior person in the role, and you're getting to hire somebody who's senior, therefore bringing in new skills, new talent, and new ways of thinking. So as a manager, just thinking very much just sort of the dynamics of like growing your scope, you're adding a leveled up person into your team, and therefore, by that means you're scaling yourself in a certain way. Whereas if you promote somebody from within, you're losing an IC in a way to advance as a product manager. Then you might get a backfill for, in terms of growing your team. So the way you're growing your team in a sense is you're gaining one IC, and then your most skilled ICs you're promoting, you're kind of losing some capacity there. At least that's one way to think about it. So
Hmm.
as a IC, when you see it happening, you have to understand that it's also mathematically it's very appealing to do so as you're scaling your team. So to promote somebody from within into that function, you really have to believe that the person is well suited, it has the aptitude, and is going to do well, and is going to well enough to make up for the that sort of loss of capacity and that loss in terms of how quickly you're growing your team. So it's a big
Yeah,
bet.
sure.
Um, and so for me, the idea of having two people that would be qualified that you could believe in equally, I mean, it just seems pretty would be uncommon. Like I've certainly not experienced that, and it might be two people who have some parts of the equation, or maybe could go into two different leadership roles. But
Right.
then you're making that bet doubly so if you do that in one go instead of hiring two people that might be growing your team more. So I could see why. I think you all seen why too. Often the cases that you're bringing somebody from outside, but
Yeah.
when you do it, I think it's because you really have to believe in the person. Like you really you've seen that person be excellent in different ways. You see that the person is very committed and you know uh, deserving. Whatever however you would define that, and you feel that you're willing to make that trade off where you lose that capacity in terms of IC, and that you're going to make up for it somehow as you grow into the team. So I can't say this is something I've done a bunch of times and I know the right thing to do, but that's my intuition anyway. Is that
Yeah.
you really have to make a commitment and investment.
In all honesty, it hasn't happened in our career, at least my career so far. It was just a hypothetical situation where, like, where you're being, where you start getting a lot of really smart people and with a lot of ambition. I'm just foreseeing a situation where, like, when I start leading teams with really high potential candidates, how do we set the expectations? Because, like, if they're all saying, I want to go through IC, that's great. But if a couple of them are saying, okay, I also want to be a good PM and I don't have as much scope, then is the right path to just be honest with one of them or like both of them, or like, yeah, how do we go about it? But it's totally hypothetical. If you haven't faced it yet, I don't think I'll have to face it for at least 5 10 years, so I'm
Well,
good.
I know. Here's what I have had to face. You have to have the conversations, right? So it's true
Yeah.
that people have the aspiration and the question for sure. And I think I'll go through the same sort of discussions with any of them about what it takes, for to go from that IC role in the PM to sort of group people manager. It's both the excellence in excelling as well as the business need part. The business need is the key part. And sometimes, if your career path you might develop for somebody who reports to you, if that's what they see as their growth trajectory, then how they can get there and how they might achieve that might not be in your team. It might have to
Yeah.
be somewhere else. And you have to be realistic, and also, I think coach people through that too. Is like, well, in order to prepare yourself to take on a next role, whether it's with this team or not, you have to still, show the aptitude. Put yourself in a position where you're ready, acting as a leader of some kind.
Yeah.
That fake it till you make it attitude, and and so you can still help with that, and whether it's by acting as an IC, but building out your experience, mentoring or leading others, or leading cross-functional teams,
Sure.
um, or coaching new hires, and that sort of thing. And these are all things you do, even if it may mean that they depart and leave your team sometime.
Awesome. Awesome. I probably can go for another 30 minutes, but like we should probably cut it short. So, Shruti, do you have any questions? Or I got one more last one, but yeah, go for it.
No, I mean, this was all great, Pierre. I think I can, especially your last sentence, right? Like, I'll have to depart, or like, I remember one of the leaders at Splunk had said, "My job is to become replaceable," right?
Hmm.
And a good leader, when they execute right, they end up doing that, even if it means to become replaceable. And in fact, we all are in some ways or the other, but you end up building a team which is really good. So kudos to you and your thought
Yeah,
process, and thank you so much for
thank you.
taking the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks so much. I appreciate the chance.
And again, like I know you're
Pleasure.
hiring for like a staff PM. Uh, Parting thought, like what are you looking for so that right people are coming to you and they probably would have done the due diligence to go to this episode and then you could be impressed that, oh, they went this deep.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the chance, Nishanth, to plug this. I mean, hiring for a key role on the team, a staff PM, to work on building the next generation of ML optimization systems for Walmart Connect. I'm always impressed when I find folks who I meet during the interview process who have done and shown that they've done some due diligence about the firm, about the Walmart Connect's trajectory. There's so much material out there. It's so easy to find, just to learn about sort of how we've been growing, and what our opportunities are. To me, that shows a lot of sort of good interest in sort of good values in terms of curiosity about the role and making sure they find the right match. And yeah, people who are interested in making a big impact at scale.
Nice. And are you looking for a specific ad tech or ML experience or like, yeah, how are you thinking about it?
Definitely, it helps to have some had exposure in ad tech, but and ML optimization, but definitely open to people who have worked in sort of adjacent areas and adjacent roles, as long as they are have willingness to learn and apply.
Awesome. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Priya.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank
Have
you,
a
Shruti.
great
Thank you,
Sunday.
Nishant.
Have a good one.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.
I can take